Hello my friends. Now if you know me, you know that this video is not going to be about whether UBI is right or wrong, but rather using this controversial topic as an entrance to learning more about ourselves. One of the basic tenets of rewilding is understanding that our mind, it really wants to imagine itself as an independent, critical thinker. And yet, the more we develop mindfulness, the more we explore and become aware of our mind's activity, the more we discover that we are largely a product of our cultural conditioning. So what our culture says, its basic ideas about reality, about right and wrong, about value, about morals, our ideas of who I am, my value as an individual, all these things are conditioned. We are brought up with them, and our mind doesn't really like to question them. Furthermore, many of our reactions to everyday things, to certain foods, for instance, the idea of eating insects, to cold versus warm, the preference for comfort, all these everyday things are also conditioned. And these are largely conditioned by elements of our culture that are not necessarily overtly consciously created. So we have an economic system that works basically by getting you to buy more and more of a certain food. So naturally, you're going to buy more and more of a certain food if it has addictive qualities. And so if I can produce Mountain Dew or Hostess cupcakes or these packaged meals that are just kind of salty, sweet, fatty, you're going to get hooked on them. And then I'm going to make more money. The economic system works. Then I might think, wow, I prefer foods that are really salty or this or that. I take this as my intrinsic preference, not recognizing that it is a culturally created conditioning. Now, I bring this up in the context of UBI because, especially if you are politically polarized, you probably saw maybe just the title of this, and immediately your mind, that part of our mind that wants to identify itself via its ideas, that part of our mind that is basically running on autopilot, that part of our mind probably wanted to say, UBI is awesome, or UBI would be the most horrible thing that would happen in the whole universe. In other words, it's going to take some ideas of whatever bubble information bubble that we're currently dwelling in, and it's going to repeat those ideas as if they were our own. Now, this is happening all the time within us. And it's a double-edged sword to become more and more aware of it. Because when we are completely unaware of it, we enjoy the bliss of just saying, this is my idea, and I stand strongly for this, and feeling justified in that. But the more we explore into mindfulness and we watch our mind's activity, we say, oh, actually, that idea I picked up from this person, and they were really convincing. But if I really think about it, there might be more to the story. And it seems, at least in my quest, it seems that I keep going and going and going and going, wow, this is unbelievable. I thought this was me, and this was me, and this was me, and this was me. This was mine, my thoughts, my ideas. But I see further and further that I was deluding myself. And you may be much more clear-minded than me and may see things more clearly. But I bet there's a fair amount of us who, the more we explore down that road, would find that same thing. That the further we go down that rabbit hole, the more and more we discover that it is not me, it is not me. Where is what I really think? And then I start to infuse some doubt. Now, this doubt can seem, from that old perspective of this is my position, that doubt can sound wishy-washy, but doubt is actually the beginning of critical thinking in us. So when we begin to explore more deeply and not accept someone else's answer or someone else's conditioning as our own. I hear people today saying, well, if we wear a mask, we're being controlled by the government. We drive on the left or right side of the road, whichever one your government says is right. We wear clothes when we go into the shopping mall, and it is not that just because you want to, you have to. You'll get arrested if you go in there without clothing. So the mask is just one more thing on top of a gigantic list, if we would look at it more clearly. A huge list of things that we have said, okay, I will relieve myself of that freedom. And the funny thing, the important thing to notice, is that if I'm fixated on the mask as a breach of freedom, that probably means that I've allowed my mind to be conditioned by the current polarity that is focusing on that and ignoring all the other things that you have to do in this culture, or that you cannot do in this culture. And if you start making a list, all of us are intelligent here, if we start making a list of what is dictated by our government or our culture, we'll find a very, very long list of things where we don't have these freedoms to just do whatever we want. So maybe we can start to see that there is a polarization of thought that can be happening. And it's not just now. This has happened all through human civilization. This polarization of human thought, so that people can get us to think the things they want us to think for various reasons, either because it lines their pockets with more money, or it makes them feel more, bolsters their ego because you like them, or it makes them feel more secure in their own beliefs, because we tend to feel more secure in our own beliefs when other people have accepted those same beliefs. So what if we take this UBI and notice, does my mind polarize? Or can I access a deeper wisdom that says, all right, if I really look critically and intelligently at almost anything, I'm going to see that the world is made up of shades of gray. I remember hearing once, and this was just somebody's surmise, but they were talking about the advent of the automobile and how no one really thought ahead to how the coming of the automobile would correlate with the division of the extended family unit into what we know as the nuclear family these days. The idea was that before automobiles, most people lived in close proximity to your extended family. But once automobiles came, we didn't realize it, but allowing that travel slowly spread families out to today, when it's very normal to have, well, sometimes family in other countries. Certainly in the United States here, it's nobody blinks if your daughter lives in California and your son lives over in New York and you live in Florida. So what would UBI do to change our world? We've all heard talking points. And again, notice if your mind wants to run off and repeat talking points. But let's stop parroting anything we've heard and think about it for ourselves. When we think about this UBI, Rebecca and I were talking about it the other day, and we went down this huge rabbit hole, essentially, of thinking of possible, because we certainly can't tell the future, but of possible repercussions and effects of a UBI. It made us realize that it was probably the Industrial Revolution that created a shift. I mean, way back in tribal times, you were valued because you were part of the family and you probably wanted to contribute back. And that was a natural arising as being part of a close-knit family group that depended upon each other for survival. That we're talking here about the basic concept we have of a human being and their valuation. Now, when we hit the Industrial Revolution, is it possible that at that point we started to think of human beings as miniature factories and started to think that the value in a human being is how much they produce, especially monetarily? And in fact, we talk about a person's net worth. What is a person valued at? In our language, we are asking how much money they are in possession of, how much wealth they are in possession of. And most of us, I found myself included, most of us have taken this into them to some extent. And we think of our own worth based on that monetary value. And furthermore, we can look around at us, and it seems very natural to look at somebody and say, that person's just sitting at home watching TV. They are worthless. They're not contributing to our culture. And when I do that, true or not, I am betraying my conditioning. Because I'm not saying that because I've sat down and really thought about it. I'm saying that because it comes very naturally out of that conditioning that I've been taught. So one repercussion of UBI might be that we have to stop thinking of people as miniature factories. And maybe we start valuing human beings on some other valuation system. And what would that valuation system be? You've probably heard me talk in older videos about sometimes I envision a world where it's not giant Amazons, but we start to value that person down the road that is a blacksmith. And when we need something metal, we go to that person. Or that person that hand makes clothing. There's, again, myself included, enormous pressure and incentive to just buy the cheap, easy thing. But what if I started putting my money into supporting the leather workers out there, the knife makers? What if I, instead of buying a K-bar, I buy a handmade knife from somebody? I'm going to pay more, but I'm going to be feeding into a different kind of system. And UBI, it seems to me, one thing it would do is it would undermine our current way of valuing human beings and their activities. Because right now, the Amazon model shows through. I make the most money by selling cheap, non-durable goods. And the people that are struggling is that knife maker, that leather worker that's been trying to start his own business, but it's darn easy to go and get that leather pouch from Amazon made somewhere by slave labor instead of buying it from that person that is charging the premium price that she or he deserves because they sat down and they hand stitched and made this incredible piece of leatherwork. So as an entrance to reclaiming that part of our mind that is just conditioned and believes itself to be me, even though it's just the conditioning, I wonder if down in the comments we could really think about this. Don't think about if UBI is right or wrong, and whether we should or should not implement it, or how much, or if it is socialism, or whatever the labels are that we have wanted to put onto it, we've been taught to put onto it. Instead, think about this one question. If humans were no longer valued based on their monetary production, what else could humans be valued upon? If you're like most of us, it might be hard to even think of anything at first, because our paradigms are so strong that it's hard to see outside of that box. And it's easy to think that there is nothing else except for the current cultural paradigm. This happens in every generation. Our culture dictates our thoughts to a large extent, and we can hardly imagine that there could be anything else. At one time, I believe in medieval Europe, a girl was of marriageable age at 14. We see that completely differently now. But the people back then, they probably can't imagine waiting till you're 18. That's crazy. To us, we might not be able to imagine at 14. That's crazy. Caught in our cultural paradigm, we can't see outside of it. But here's our chance. And this is a really big and important, I think, paradigm. How we value other people. How we value ourselves. So, down in the comments, if you're up for the challenge, share what else humans could be valued on besides money and their monetary value. I cannot wait to see what you have to write down there. I am continually amazed by the level of thinking that people display down there in the comments on this channel. I feel very blessed to have this community of people who really seem able to step outside of that box. All right, my friends, so much love to you. Thank you for watching, and super excited to see what you have to say in the comments.